Together at this lovely hour. Chair notes that there's a presence of a quorum, and I'm grateful for that. I'm going to ask Senator Mallow if he would to open us with a word of prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us go to the Lord in prayer. Most gracious, eternal, everlasting God, our Father, we thank you for this time and opportunity that you have extended to us here on your earth. Father, for we know that it is because of your grace and your mercy that we are present and that we are still here. Father, we just ask that you show up in this place, that you guide us with wisdom, justice, and moderation. And Father, we ask that we commit ourselves to your will and to your way. And we ask all of these many blessings to each member of this committee and those that are here and those that are watching online. Father, that you continue to be a blessing to them and provide to them. May you lift up the light of your countenance upon them and give them peace forever is my prayer. In your name we do pray. Amen.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opening prayer. We have two agenda items for today. Senate Bill 189 was recommitted, and kind of walk us through why that's the case, because I asked that we have an opportunity to make a fairly minor adjustment. And then we have SB 212 this afternoon. We'll be taking public input. We're grateful for that. Do we have a sign-up sheet for public input? Anyone who wishes to provide public input, we welcome that. I'm going to ask Vice Chairman Williams if he will assume the chair, and I will provide the input for the two bills as we consider SB 189 and SB 212. Senator.
Right. Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, you may present your bill. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Now we're going to consider first Senate Bill 189. This is a bill that we discussed last week. We made some fairly nominal adjustments, but I wanted to bring it back to the committee. I asked it to be recommitted to the committee so we could review it one more time. We're working off of LC 472770S. Essentially what this bill does is it requires that any tabulation of votes be from the text portion of a ballot and not the QR code. So if you look with me at line 12, it specifies that the text portion of the ballot marked and printed by the electronic ballot marker indicating the elector's selection shall constitute the official ballot and shall constitute the official vote. And then if you look at line 16, this is where there is a minor change from the bill that we considered last week. The official tabulation, I'm reading on line 16, the official tabulation count of any ballot scanner shall be based upon the text portion, or, this is what was intended, the machine mark, provided that such a mark clearly denotes the elector's selection and does not use the QR code, the barcode, or any other similar coding. And the reason for this particular change was to allow the Secretary of State to either utilize a text portion of the ballot, a printed portion of the ballot, or they could use a mark on the ballot like we utilize for our absentee ballots. So a mark sense concept as opposed to a QR code. So the QR code is still not permissible, but what you can do is read the text or the machine mark. So most of us are familiar with our absentee ballots. Our absentee ballots require that the ballots be bubbled in to indicate the elector's choice, and that those ballots would continue to be used. We would just allow for the option of providing either a text to be read or a person's mark on the absentee or a machine mark if it were generated from the election system. So that's the simple change we added just on line 17, or the machine mark, provided that that mark clearly denotes the elector's selection and does not use a QR code, barcode, or similar coding. That's the essence of SB 189. We passed it out of committee last week. I'd ask the committee's favorable consideration.
You have a question from number 13 that
Yes.
you, Senator Arbor?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I was just going to say thank you. This has been one of the issues that many of my constituents have come and said, we would like to know how our ballot is read by the marks that are there, not a QR code. And I think this creates trust in our elections more so. And I think anything we can do to do that is it's beneficial to us and the state and to the people that trust the system. But thank you. Great, I think a great move. Just was going to comment on that portion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Any other member of the committee have any questions? We do have a couple of people that had signed up that would like to speak. Mr. Todd Edwards with ACCG.
Sir, I'd like to speak on Senate Bill 212, please.
Okay. Okay. You was on 189.
If it please the chair, could we do both bills
Okay,
and then accept input?
Sure, we can do that. Let's see, we got Senator Mallow. Is that you?
Thank you, Chairman Williams, to the author of the bill. And of course, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. This bill would allow for the text portion of the ballot to be read by the ballot tabulator that would read the text portion of the ballot. Will we have new ballots to delineate the text on the ballot? Because I was one of the first people in the state to go through actual recount. When I was in my primary in 2020, I went through the first hand recount in the state of Georgia, and we had a manual recount, and we had to count those ballots. And the way the ballot prints off, some of those elector's choices, I went to school, we had a Scantron, I had to use number 2 pencil, and if you bubble outside the line, the Scantron will reject your answer. So my question is, just so my voters have confidence in whatever this may be, and when I say my voters, I'm talking about voters in the Democratic Party, I want to make sure that, is there going to be a new ballot paper? Is there going to be some delineation on that? Is there going to be some spacing, some formatting? I mean, how's that going to happen?
I appreciate the senator's question, and you're right. There are a lot of technical questions that have to be answered. I will say that the Secretary of State and in conversations with multiple vendors, we could technically take the ballot that is being printed now from the Dominion system, the Dominion voting system, the ballot that's printed, and actually tabulate the elector's choice from the printed context or the printed text on that ballot. That is one way to do it. So it is technically possible to remove the QR code or any other encoded, non-human readable content and read the actual content of the ballot. So we're going to leave the details and the technical requirements up to the Secretary of State as they work through the implementation of this. But at the end of the day, the machine would read the human readable content of the ballot, not a code, a QR code or a barcode or some non-human readable code. But actually, you could take that same ballot and verify the count. So I would suggest that the technology has improved since our current system was procured and implemented to allow us that ability. We already read the absentee ballots. We already read provisional ballots. We already read emergency ballots. And all of those ballots, that technology that does that, it would be integrated into the ballot tabulation component.
Thank you, Chairman Burns. And just a final follow-up question. Will this change the process in which ballots are adjudicated, as you know, with provisional ballots and or absentee ballots? If there's an issue with a ballot scanning through the tabulator, that there's a process where that ballot will be adjudicated as to the intent of where that ballot may go. But this is talking about the text portion of the machine mark. And so I just want to make certain that, you know, however the tabulators work to scan the ballots, there's no issue. Like if you here at the state capitol, and our ballots our printers tend to print other stuff on the ballot, you know, because we have those printers, and sometimes you get other black lines and dots on there that doesn't throw off the tabulator or the machine, so that we don't have any more distrust than necessary in our elections.
Well, thank you for the question. That's a very good question. I think at the end of the day, we want to build trust. Currently, the ballots are tabulated strictly from the mark. We would remove the QR code mark, and we would read the text itself, or in the case of a hand marked ballot or a absentee ballot, it reads the mark since. There are alignment registrating marks, but they do not contain additional ballot information. So what we're doing with this bill is we're saying count the physical electors' choices either through text or perhaps from a mark sense, but it would be the mark like a mark for an absentee ballot, which we currently use. So the objective of the bill is to enhance voter confidence, to allow the voter to have the ability to read their actual ballot and have it appropriately tabulated. So I would say we worked hard to get this bill to a point where it can facilitate voter confidence. It's a voter confidence bill, and if we can achieve the goal of having this legislation adopted, I think we'll go a long way to ensuring that all of our voters, all political perspectives, will have confidence in the election.
All right, Senator Hatchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the chairman for bringing this piece of legislation. This has honestly been an issue that's been brought to my attention from a lot of my constituents, and I think you said it best. This is about voter confidence, and at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion.
And now be the appropriate time.
I'd like to make a motion do pass LC 472770S.
Have a second by Chairman Robertson. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Majority has it. Ayes, take it. All right, Mr. Chairman, go ahead and present your second bill, if you will, please, sir.
The second bill is SB 212. I'm working from LC 472771S. This is a bill that was brought to us last year by our probate judges and the Probate Judges Association to shift election responsibility away from the probate judge in a limited number of counties. Currently in Georgia, 25 or so, it changes. 25 or so counties currently have probate judges responsible for their election process. Presents a bit of a conflict of interest because in every periodic cycle, the probate judge themselves are on the ballot. So they're administering the election, but they're on the ballot. So one of the things we wanted to do is to clean that up, to basically create boards of registration and elections in all remaining counties. Again, there's roughly 25 or so of these counties. Create a board of elections, give them the power of the election process, have them engage and employ an election superintendent and conduct elections in a more independent way. Again, we work with Probate Judges Association in Georgia. We've worked with ACCG. We've gone through this process for almost a year now, and what you have in front of you is the culmination of that collective work. And I want to make sure that we understand we're working off of LC 2771S. Now, the pertinent part of this legislation removes the probate judge from responsibility for conducting elections. So in section 1, the duties of the probate judge, you'll note that on line, I think it's line 27, they don't perform the election duties. And then again, there's in section 2, it deals with the supplement that probate judges receive for various duties. In section 2, lines 42 through 45, we strike that additional compensation. It was very nominal. Section 3, same thing, where we're removing the probate judge's responsibility for elections. Section 4, the same thing on line 63. And in section 5, we removed a portion of that language which called for local legislation. In the past, you've had to deal with local legislation if you were moving from a probate judge's responsibility for election to a local board of elections. Since we will now not have probate judges be tasked with the need to conduct elections, there's no longer a need to empower them to do that. You'll notice we did change a couple of dates because this legislation on line 88 and actually on line 82, it's effective January 1st of 2025. And the reason for that is if any communities wish to have local legislation to structure a board of elections, registration elections, different from what this general legislation provides, they can do that. They can still do that through the end of this electoral session, during the 2024 session. But if they do not enact local legislation, then they would be covered by this general legislation beginning January 1st of 2025. All right, now, from the draft that we were working from last week, I want to point out the changes. And I took the opportunity to get input from probate judges and multiple county boards of elections. And the question really became one of how many members are on the local board, and then how long they would serve, and then how they elected their chairman. If you'll notice, in line, I believe it's 98. Excuse me, let's go back just a bit. You'll notice in line 94 that the board shall be composed of 3 members, which is the standard size, but by local ordinance, they can expand that to 5 members. Most of these are small communities, and many of them prefer a 3-member board. Some prefer a 5-member board. We're giving them that option. They can have either 3 or 5. And then as you go down in section C, originally we had proposed 2-year terms in the old legislation, the previous one we were considering last week. We've changed that to a 4-year term, or until a successor is appointed, so that each Board of Election member would serve for 4 years, and then they would have staggered starts. So that if you note in line, I'm trying to find the line number. Basically, if it's a 3-member board, 1 member would serve for 2 years, and 2 members would serve for 4 years, and it would then rotate for 4-year terms, and the same would be true if you had a 5-member board. So the bottom line is you could serve on a board of elections initially for either a 1 or 2-year term, and then after that it would be 4-year terms. You'd serve either a 2-year or 4-year term. If you notice, we removed all requirements or all constraints on consecutive terms. Original bill that we looked at last week did indeed require a limit of 4 consecutive terms. Now there's no limit on how often or how long a member of the election board could serve, but they serve at the pleasure of the commission. They serve at the pleasure of the local governing body. We did not make any other changes to the legislation from last week when we went through this bill. I think if you look carefully, you'll see the local boards of commissioners, the governing authority of the county, has the ability to appoint the boards the members of the board, whether it's a 3-member board or a 5-member board, the commission makes the appointment. The parties can make a nomination, so any political party can nominate a member of the board, but the Board of Commissioners is not required to choose a member from the nomination itself. And in case of a county that may be heavily in one party or another, they would certainly have the privilege of appointing members to represent their community, and where there's a diversity, I think you're going to see boards that are more diverse politically. I would say that the chairman of who chairs the board, the local board of elections, has been a point of discussion. This legislation calls for the board to elect its own chairman and basically report that election to the county governing authority, and then they become the chairman of the commission of the Board of Elections, registration elections, for the duration of their term or until they are not reappointed as chair. I will say that the board has the authority, the Board of Elections has the authority to employ either a part-time or a full-time employee to serve as their election officer, generally called a superintendent or supervisor. And at the end of the day, we're attempting to make sure that we have local boards of elections in all 159 counties that would either be 3-member boards or 5-member boards at the discretion of the county commission, and that the term of their service is 4 years, but it would be a staggered start. They can be reappointed. There's no limit on the number of terms that they could be reappointed to, but if the commission chooses to, they could appoint someone else at the next cycle. This legislation would become effective January the 1st of 2025. And the majority of the bill deals with, as you get into Section 6, removing languages related to probate judges and providing oaths that the members of the boards of elections would take. And then at the end of the day, our objective is to ensure that there are local election boards, local boards of registration and elections in all 159 counties. If a county is currently using the probate judge to conduct elections, and they're uncomfortable with the proposed SB 212, they still can request a local legislation, and that their respective member of the legislature can submit local legislation to craft their local board as they see fit. If a local jurisdiction, a county, chooses to not utilize that technique, then on January the 1st of 2025, they would fulfill, or they would be responsible for implementing a local board of registration elections per SB 212. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you. You do have one. Senator Mallow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I see the probate court judge council folks in the back, and I see ACCG here. My only concern with this piece of legislation is just for counties. My family's from a little small rural part outside of Savannah called Pinpoint. We always talk about how to make ends meet. So I saw that the supplement for the probate court judge was only extra $385.90. Well, I divided that by 3 folk. That's $128 a person. Well, surely that ain't gonna fly. Okay, that dog won't hunt. So for our counties in rural Georgia, how can they make this dog hunt? Because they're gonna have to come up with some more money. Because $128 ain't going too far to get somebody paid to do this, and they got to hire a clerk and some other stuff by separating that out from the probate court judge. And so my concern is not actually about the legislation, but just how our smaller counties that ain't doing as well as everybody else trying to make ends meet, robbing Peter to pay Paul, how are they gonna do that?
I thank you for the question, and it's a very valid point. I represent 11 counties in East Georgia, East Central Georgia. Of those 11 counties, 4 of them utilize probate judges, and all but one have requested local legislation to move from the probate judge to a local board of elections. I would have to defer to ACCG, but it's my understanding that all of our counties have boards of registration. Is that fair?
I'm not certain on that.
I'm not certain, but I would say that in most cases, you have counties that have a board of registration. And what we would do in this case is they have the option, by the way, of combining registration and elections together. So that there is a cost to the county as they assume the responsibility for elections. But I would suggest to you that the counties that I've had a chance to communicate with are strongly in favor of accepting that responsibility and recognizing that they may have some additional cost burden. They're already paying for the elections. They're already paying either through the registrar, because the registrar will run the elections for early voting, and then the probate judge has election day voting. So what we're trying to do now is have one election system in a county. And I would suggest that that level of consistency is good, and that level of voter participation, citizen participation in the election process through a local election board is a good thing. And again, we're not dictating that that election board have any number of representatives from either party, but the county commission represents the community, and they will then make the selection of who serves on the board of registration and elections. So I would suggest that the benefit of a local board of elections, registration and elections, especially when they are the same people, they have the same training, they would go through the same process of certification and education, that in itself would benefit the elections process. You have citizen oversight of your elections.
Let's see, number 4.
It's me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to inquire as to how many counties use probate.
That's a good question. We talked about that at the last meeting, Madam Leader. It's hard to tell because it's a moving target. It's between 23 and 26. The last list that I have suggests it's Baldwin, Blakely, Calhoun, Candler, Chattahoochee, Chattooga, Clay, Colquitt, Judge, Eccles, Evans, Gilmer, Grady, Jasper, Jenkins, Lawrence, Quitman, Shelley, Seminole, Telfair, Talifer, Troutland, my county, Warren, and Wilkes. So there's between, and I'll be happy to provide a list, they're between 23 to 25 or 6, and the reason why it's hard to pin down, I have had 3 counties out of 4 request local legislation to form this board, and I have accommodated their request. I only have, I believe, 1 county, maybe 2 counties, that would still be impacted by a general legislation piece like SB 212. So I would suggest to you that of 159 counties in Georgia, 120-ish of those already have this structure. And we're trying to get every county to have a local board of registration and elections. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good for Georgia. I think it's good for elections. And I would hope that we could agree.
Any other committee member have a question? Mr. Edwards with ACCG.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Todd Edwards again with the Association County Commissioners of Georgia. This bill was taken up by this committee last year. At that point, ACCG did have an opposed position. We were asked to continue working with the author that we have over the interim for many months, many reiterations, many recommendations. We are now neutral on the legislation in front of you. The biggest concern was, as was raised earlier, is always the cost. As you read through or listened to the list of counties, some of those are our smallest counties. It will be somewhat of a cost impact to them. Admittedly, that is a concern. We've let them know that this legislation was coming. Obviously, there's already a cost with any election bills that are passed up here, the amount of election bills, when things change, et cetera. But also, Georgia's ground zero nationwide, and it will be next general election and moving forward. I hate to say it, but we've become somewhat of a purple state on the national elections. There's a lot of contention. There's a lot of the spotlight is on them. There's a lot of lawsuits. All groups from all over the country will be focusing on us. It's probably time to professionalize these staffs. The probates have a lot on their plates. We worked with the author on addressing some of the cost concerns. They have to go through the county governing authority or the county commission for the approval of salaries. They do get to appoint the supervisor, but again, that salary has to be approved by the county commission. So that was taken into consideration as well. One day moving forward, if perhaps this committee could look at something like a nature of counties sharing some election responsibilities. I mean, actually on election day, you'll have to have workers in place, but as far as supervisors, et cetera, we don't see that legislation yet, but it might be something to consider to help with. But we did work with them, have a lot of revisions that we had asked for that were incorporated in the bill. We appreciate Chairman Burns' cooperation in that regard, and again, we're neutral on this bill. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Robertson? Okay.
Sorry.
Ms. Battles?
Yes, I'm on the sign-up sheet for this bill. I wanted you to know that before you said it. You mean I get the bill? I know, right? You're just staring at me. Vice Chair, I don't know if I'm in trouble or not.
Let's see what you say first.
Committee, thank you so much for allowing me the chance to speak. I would like to thank the sponsor for having several conversations with me about this bill as well. I do want to say I'm enthusiastically in favor of this. As a proud graduate of 1991 Chattooga Indians, I remember when the probate judge passed away and had multiple conversations with folks as they tried to figure out how to run their elections. I think the one problem issue, let's call it an issue instead of a problem. I think that there's a couple of places where I would like to see some balance of power, particularly because we've seen situations where Board of Elections were reconstituted by boards of commission, so that we've seen women of color replaced. We've seen a situation where there was a Democratic person who was replaced by a Republican person, and then polling places shut down. And and I think in a lot of situations that is actually because of cost issues, but it looks partisan, right? So one of the things that I would like to see, also in Lincoln County, when they ignored the petition drive that was done by citizens to keep polling locations open, the Board of Elections, the chair of the Board of Elections literally said we're doing this because of the Board of Commissions. So I think we want to be careful in how we balance that power between the two of them, especially when you consider the fact that if something happens during the elections, it's not the Board of Commissioners that gets investigated by the state election board, it's the Board of Elections. So a couple of places, lines 95 to 97 or 102, I think that there should be some sort of language that it's the norm that the Board of Commissioners accepts the suggestions of the party, or you do something like each political party gets one nomination and the Board of Commissioners gets a nomination. And then lines 162 to 168, I'd have to refer to ledge counsel or a lawyer. I think that language needs to be tightened up a little bit because it says the Board of Elections is responsible for hiring someone, but then it says the Board of Commissioners gets approval of that hire. And what I'm afraid of, and again, I recognize the scope of this bill is very narrow, but still, you could have a situation in these counties that is similar to what happened with Macon-Bibb, where the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Elections got into a whole litigation situation over who had the right to hire an election supervisor. So those are just the suggestions. Again, I am not a lawyer. I know I try and act like one sometimes, so I would refer to Ledge Counsel or someone who could tighten up that language. Otherwise, I think this is a great thing to do. So that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Wait. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that's the, they want that thing blinking.
Sorry, I'll do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just asking what was been asked earlier about the cost situation, the cost, potential cost that may occur. How do you kind of address that issue?
I appreciate you asking that question, but I think one of the things that we need to talk about when we talk about the cost of what this legislation is going to do is an overarching situation of how we fund elections in Georgia. And I think part of what we're going to have to do is the state is going to have to be willing to appropriate funds to counties to help them run their elections, because we're seeing a number of unfunded mandates that have been passed, not just this year, not just since 2020, but I mean, I can even think of some in 2019. And I've said this multiple times. I'm working on getting cost comparisons from counties, but what we see is elections becoming more and more expensive, and counties struggling to pay for that, and the state is not appropriating funds to cover that. And then we saw 202, where we also took the ability to write grants or try to get funds from other places. So I think ultimately, if we're going to do these kind of things, and I mean, we heard Georgia's going to be ground zero. I don't hate the fact that it's a purple state because I love democracy, but I think that if we're going to run our elections in a way where we're ground zero and everyone's looking at us, we've got to make sure that the money is there. And I've used this analogy before, but we're wanting like Broadway productions with a community theater budget.
Thank you. Senator Chairman Robertson.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
No.
I apologize. I have no questions for you, ma'am.
Okay,
I
thanks.
appreciate you. Yes, ma'am. If the time is right, I'll make a motion to pass.
Time is right. Have a motion. Second. Any discussion? Ma'am? Oh. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? So carry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there's no other,
We have one more order of business, Mr.
one more order of business,
Chairman.
well, come back and,
I want to thank the committee for their patience and support. I want to thank those of you who are here. We have a very special person with us today. It's a birthday day, so we're going to recognize Miss Cindy Battle. She's spending her birthday advocating for the people of Georgia, and we're grateful for that. Now, I think we need to adjourn the meeting because we can't sing until we adjourn, okay? So is there a motion to adjourn? Motion.
so moved.
Any objections? We're adjourned. Now, everyone, are you ready?